Today we're going to be studying Daniel chapter 5, but before we get into chapter 5, I want to go over this timeline that I have on here about the different waves of a captivity. We see that the first year that's mentioned of the first captivity was in 605 BC, and that is when Daniel and the nobility, some of the royal officials and nobility, were put into captivity. It wasn't a very large number, but there were mainly younger people that were taken, and they were handsome, and they were chosen to help out in the palace, or they were going to be trained for a while, and the king was going to pick the best. And Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are some of the ones that ended up being like 10 times better than any of the other ones. The second wave of captivity came during the year of 597, 598. It was Jehoiakim is a king at that point. He's only 18 years old. He is not going to reign very long. I think it's like 6 months when he ends up being taken into captivity. And he is going to remain in Babylon till like his whole life. He's going to be like 38 years old. I mean, he's going to be in captivity like 38 years, and then he's going to be freed and be able to live under another ruler that's going to treat him almost like a family member. So he's not being treated like a captive anymore, but he's been living in there along with his family and his officials. They've all remained in Babylon in captivity. Then in 586 BC, that is when Nebuchadnezzar ends up destroying the temple, taking most of the people into captivity that would go with him. If they weren't willing to just surrender to him, those that were trying to get away from him would have been killed. They were told through the prophet Jeremiah that if they would go and go peacefully when he came to invade the land, they would not have to be one of the ones that are killed, and they would be taken care of in Babylon. But if they refuse to surrender and try to get away, and Zedekiah is the king at this time who is rebelling against Nebuchadnezzar. That's the reason why Nebuchadnezzar attacked. He refused to keep paying the money to Nebuchadnezzar. They were a vassal kingdom, which means that they had to be under control of another king. And as long as they paid their dues, they were pretty much left alone. But Zedekiah decides he doesn't want to pay that anymore, and that's when Nebuchadnezzar sends his army and they destroy the temple, and even Zedekiah tries to get away. And because of that, his eyes are poked out, his family members are killed in front of him, and he's taken off to captivity where he's going to die in Babylon. So now that we're starting Daniel chapter 5, this is going to be where Nebuchadnezzar's grandson is now ruling. It's and many years later, this is and his name, it's really confusing because his name is really close to Daniel's name that he was giving. Remember, Daniel's name is Belteshazzar. This guy that is the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar is called Belshazzar. So don't get confused, because I know many times I can get confused. But King Belshazzar has been ruling now for he's in the 17th year of his reign. And it sounds like he's co-ruling with the Queen Mother because of something that's being said in Daniel 5, 10, and 16. I'm not positive about that, but that's what it seems, because he's going to get some advice from the Queen Mother. Okay, so let's begin Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, it says his father, but it's actually grandfather, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So what were they doing? Well, King Nebuchadnezzar, when he had destroyed the temple, had taken all the articles that were in the temple that were gold and silver, anything of value, before he burned it down, and he brought those articles back into his kingdom. And so they're using them during this banquet, what is sacred and that only the priests could use for worshiping God and and used to serving God, is now being used by this king in a very disrespectful way. They were not being honored. And because of that, God's going to take care of it. When he says that he can take vengeance without somebody else doing something, we're going to see how he handles this situation. In verse 3, so they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, and of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. Oh my goodness, if that were you, if you were sitting there at a party and all these people, there's thousands of people that are here at that party, and all of a sudden everybody looks up and they see just a human hand writing on a wall. Not any part of a body, only a hand is writing letters on this wall. And you can imagine what kind of fear that would put into you. Well, same thing for Belshazzar. He is terrified when he sees that. Look at what happens to him. It says, the king watched the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. That reminds me, I used to watch Don Knotts on some of the shows with, I forget what the show is, the Andy Griffith show. And sometimes his knees would be knocking and stuff that he'd get scared about stuff. When I picture this guy, I'm thinking of Don Knotts, that how he looked when he was on some of the shows when he was getting frightened about something. Verse 7, the king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Then he said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Why the third highest ruler in the kingdom? Because I believe his mother is second in command. He's the top, but she is underneath him. Verse 8, then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. May the king live forever, she said. Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered the king, you may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spear, he speared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted, and those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like the ox, and his body was drenched with dew of heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes. But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the interpretation that was written. That took a long time for him to get to the point where now he's going to read this inscription, because he wanted him to understand that if he had learned the lessons from his grandfather, and I know I keep saying father, but a lot of times they would say Father Abraham for generations to come, but that didn't mean that it was actually the generation of it, that person being their father. So when we look at history, it says that Belshazzar is his grandson. So I think that's the reason why he goes through this whole history with his grandfather, to show him that you should have learned this lesson from what your grandfather had experienced, but you haven't. Look how you have defiled and insulted God by using his holy temple articles and drinking wine, getting drunk. They were worshiping false gods while they were getting drunk with these holy articles from the temple, and God was not going to put up with it. So that's why this message is coming. He wanted to give that explanation so that he understood why God wrote this message down there. Many, many tekel parson. Here's what these words mean. Many, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Paris, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. It's very clear what Daniel says. You have been found wanting. You are not the kind of person that God wants to keep on the throne. Since you are not worthy, your kingdom's coming to an end, and it's going to come quickly. It comes to end very quickly. Verse 29. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Well, that's not going to last long, and Daniel didn't even want that stuff. He was given those things even though he had asked not to be given them. The king's going to do it anyhow, but there's only going to be one night that he gets to be the third highest, because that very night in verse 30, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Now, even though it says Darius the Mede took over the kingdom, there was a co-reign at this time. So Cyrus was over the one part of the kingdom, the Persian part. The Mede part, Darius was ruling. They were relatives of each other. So don't get confused when it says that he was there till the first year of Cyrus. This is going to be Cyrus's first year too. Although there is going to be a change when he is by himself. Cyrus is going to be the ruler. No, I take that back. It's going to be Darius that's going to end up ruling by himself again at some point. I think that's how it works. So anyhow, there is a co-reign going on here. So that ends the kingdom of the Babylonians, and now the Medo-Persian government has taken over.